He was born on December 10, 1890 in the village of Kuzan, Isterlidamak Ishimbe district, in the territory of the Bashkir Autonomous Republic of the current Russian Federation. His father was Almadja and his mother was Amulhayat Hanım. Both his father and mother came from an educated and cultured family, and according to his own statements, he learned Arabic from his father and Persian from his mother. Later, he went to his uncle Habib Najjar's madrasa in the neighboring village and took Arabic literature lessons. In the meantime, he started Russian. When he learned of his father's desire to marry him and make him an imam mullah in his village, he fled to Kazan and completed his education at the Kasimiye Madrasa. He met Russian Orientalists in Kazan. He then worked as a teacher at Kasimiye and Osmaniye Madrasas in Ufa. ZEKİ VELIDI, on the one hand, focused on the issues of the Bashkir community to which he belonged, and on the other hand, he became interested in Turkish history. He overcame the narrow framework Tatarism or Islam and adopted a broader understanding of Turkishness. With the support of Russian Orientalists in Kazan, he made 2 research trips to Turkestan. He was elected as the Bashkir representative to the delegation that would assist the deputies in the Russian Parliament Duma on the issues of Muslim communities and went to Petersburg in 1915. While he was engaged in political affairs there, he also established close relations with Russian Orientalists. With the help of V.V. Barthold, he avoided military service. He criticized the Turkish Historical Research Committee established in Ankara in 1930 and the history book prepared by the committee, even though the information in the book had received Atatürk's approval. When he repeated his criticisms at the Turkish History Congress in July 1932, he faced harsh reactions from Rashid Galib, M. Şemseddin Günaltay, and Sadri Maksudi Arsal. Upon this, he resigned from his position at the university and went to Vienna. On June 6, 1935, he completed his doctorate on Ibn Fadlan and worked at Bonn University in Germany. In 1938, he moved to Göttingen University. The following year, due to the approaching World War, he returned to Turkey and resumed his position at Istanbul University on September 1, 1939. In May 1944, he He was arrested for his involvement in the Turanizm movement and was imprisoned for 15 months. He was tried by the martial law court. Although he was initially convicted, he was released in October 1945 upon the reversal of the Military Court of Cassation and acquitted on March 31, 1947. He was able to return to his position at the university in 1948. He was the president of the X-With Congress of Undersecretaries convened in Istanbul in 1951. In 1953, he re-established the previously closed Institute of Islamic Studies and became its first director. Until 1970, TOGAN continued to work at Istanbul University, and after an operation in April, he died on July 26, 1970, and was buried in Karacaahmet Cemetery. While everything was going well, ZEKİ VELIDI received the Turkish history thesis booklet prepared by the Turkish History Research Committee in 1930. This book was printed in a certain number and sent to the relevant people as the first stage of the Turkish history thesis. ZEKİ VELIDI, who examined the book, had objections to the theses described in the book. When he repeated these objections at the first Turkish History Congress to be held in 1932, he attracted lightning. This meant the beginning of the countdown for ZEKİ VELIDI. The aim of the first Turkish History Congress convened on July 2, 1932 was to construct an artificial history by isolating the history of Turks and Anatolia from Islam, Seljuks and Ottomans. ZEKİ VELIDI opposed some of these theses on the grounds that they did not reflect historical facts. However, the Turkish history thesis book, which was published in 1930 and sent to him, was created with the approval of Mustafa Kemal. During the session, which was also watched by Mustafa Kemal, ZEKİ VELIDI came under the wrath of Reşit Galip, Şemseddin Günaltay and Sadri Maksudi, who wanted to sell themselves to the authorities. The booklet prepared by the Turkish History Research Committee aimed at a complete break with the past and embraced racist attitudes. This attitude was a reflection of the period when the new republic was under the influence of Italian fascism and German Nazism, the influence of Italian fascism and German Nazism on the new republic. In the following years, skull measurements to prove Turkishness would also be carried out in the context of this thesis. This thesis was clearly written with an inferiority complex. It tried to prove that Turks belonged to the white race like Europeans and that the Europeanness of Turks was indisputable. In addition, on the one hand, it aimed to sever the Turks' ties with Islam, and on the other hand, it declared this thesis as a source of legitimacy to erase the Ottoman Empire, which it considered as an enemy, from its history. ZEKİ VELIDI was not the only one who objected to the Turkish history thesis. Fuat Kurpulu also objected to the history thesis. According to him, some sources were evaluated as it suited the authors of the thesis and some sources were ignored. At the first Turkish History Congress, Kurpulu made these criticisms with an unusual politeness and timidity. Despite this politeness and timidity, the severe criticism he received made Kurpulu take a step back. He did not criticize the thesis again during the Congress. On the contrary, he took a step back by declaring that he had been misunderstood and that he had not expressed himself correctly. Kurpulu did his best not to be labeled a dissident, because he knew very well what could happen to a dissident. Years later, when asked about his stance at the Turkish History Congress, he would say, "What could I do? My house is not on my back." With these words, he was pointing at ZEKİ VELIDI, saying that he had somewhere to go and he had to stay here. ZEKİ VELIDI did not back down from his criticisms, and he tried to respond with courtesy to the insults and humiliations directed at him, especially by Reşit Galip. But in the face of the fierce tone of his opponents, his polite answers were insufficient. The next day, the newspapers attacked ZEKİ VELIDI as if they had received instructions, and ZEKİ VELIDI was accused of treason and forgery of historical documents. ZEKİ VELIDI could not withstand these organized attacks any longer and was forced to resign from the university the same year. He then went to Vienna. Here he continued his studies on Turkish history and completed his doctorate. After his doctorate, he went to Germany and continued his studies on Turkish history first in Göttingen and then in Bonn universities. In 1937, he sent a letter of amnesty to be delivered to Mustafa Kemal by Afet İnan. This letter of ZEKİ VELIDI, who was a respected scholar in Europe, was different from the previous letters of pardon written to Mustafa Kemal, because he was enjoying the comfort of carrying his house on his back. ZEKİ VELIDI was not begging. He wanted to carry out the work he had been doing for years in his country, where he thought it would be more beneficial, and he wanted to write his books in Turkish. Çankaya did not respond to this letter, which is registered in the Presidential Archive with the numbers 01019745. The text of the letter is given below. There is another letter dated 1933 with the numbers 01018843 in the Presidential Archive. In this letter, ZEKİ VELIDI denies the allegations made against him after the First Turkish History Congress and tries to give Mustafa Kemal accurate information about himself. The pages of this letter are also published as photographs between the articles. In November 1938, when he returned to Turkey after Mustafa Kemal's death, it was 1939. As soon as he returned, he started working at Istanbul University. However, conditions were changing rapidly. Until the end of World War II, Turkey, which had adopted a pro-Nazi Germany stance, changed its attitude when it realized that Germany would lose the war and started to cozy up to the Allied states, especially the USA. In this context, operations against nationalist Tyrannist associations and individuals began. This time, ZEKİ VELIDI was put on trial with names such as Alparslan Turkish and Nihal Atsiz on charges of nationalism tyrannism. While Turkish and Atsiz were acquitted, VELIDI was sentenced to 10 years in prison. After serving 1.5 years, the Military Court of Cassation overturned his sentence. He was released in 1945 and acquitted in 1947. In 1948, he returned to his chair at Istanbul University, which was established instead of the closed Darülfünun. He continued to work on Turkish history until his death. With this case, Nihal Atsiz and ZEKİ VELIDI TOGAN's paths crossed for the second time. At the First Turkish History Congress, in response to Reşit Galip's words, "I am very grateful that I am not standing in front of ZEKİ VELIDI's chair at Darülfünun as a student." Nihal Atsiz and his fellow assistants at the university sent a telegram of protest and said, "We are proud to be ZEKİ VELIDI's student." Of course, Nihal Atsiz, who challenged Reşit Galip, would not be left unpunished. His university professor Fuat Kurpurlu first reacted to this insolence and cut off his relationship with him. Then, with the collaboration of Reşit Galip, Hikmet Bayer, and Hasan Ali Yücel, he was expelled from Darülfünun and appointed as a Turkish teacher at Malatya Secondary School. And that was not all. The authority was charting a course, but some traitorous internal elements were objecting. This was not something the authority could accept. Dozens of opposition organizations and individuals had been silenced so far, but it was understood that those who objected to their theses had to be purged from Darülfünun. ZEKİ VELIDI's attitude at the First Turkish History Congress, Nihal Atsiz and other academics on his side showed that Darülfünun was not serving the desired purpose. Therefore, the closure of the Darülfünun was inevitable. Reşit Galip, who could fit a lock on every door, closed the Darülfünun in July 1933 and fired all its professors, leaving them unemployed.